I'm going to share more than you ever wanted to know about talking to yourself. Martin Lloyd-Jones wrote a book called Spiritual Depression and Its Cause and Cure. And there was one line in there that, even though I read it about 30 years ago, if not more, I remember well. He said there are two kinds of people in this world. There are those who listen to themselves, and there are those who talk to themselves. And he said, it's better to talk to yourself than listen to yourself. And I would go on to say that it's better to argue with yourself than to listen to yourself. In our Head to Heart ministry, we have a threat that we address as people meet in small groups. And that threat is false beliefs and false pictures. False beliefs are usually connected with how we see things and our perspective. And in 1 John, we're going to see an illustration of talking to yourself. 1 John 3 and 4 deal with loving, being loved by God, and loving others. And there's a portion in 1 John chapter 3 that talks about how we should talk to ourselves. And the portion is from verse 18 through verse 23 of 1 John 3. The beginning of this portion begins with little children. We should not be loving in word or with the tongue, but in activity and truth. This is my own translation. Then in verse 23 it says, and this is his commandment, that we believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another, just as he commanded us. So the topic is loving one another. But what's significant about this is how supreme loving or having affection for God that controls our relationships, and affection for people, and how that should control our relationships and be a real indicator of spiritual health. Because after he says, don't just love in word or with the tongue, John goes on to say in verse 19, and by this we are personally recognizing. Again, I'm translating directly from the Greek text. We are personally recognizing that we're directly out of God. We're children of God. And before him, we shall persuade our hearts. Now, the New American Standard Version has assure. But the Greek word is actually the standard Greek word for persuading someone. In this case, it's persuading our own hearts. And let's see what we should persuade our own hearts about. Because, next verse, if our heart personally knows and holds something against us, it's translated condemn in the New American Standard Version. But it's actually a word that is combined of two elements. The first one is down, or against, and the second is personally knowing. And if our heart personally knows something about us and holds it against us, we need to remember something. For God is greater than our hearts, and he personally knows everything. And so what John is saying, don't allow your heart to be the final arbitrator of who you are before God. Let God do that. And if there are false beliefs, false pictures, or sinful activity that your heart is holding against you, remember the real test is not your memory. It's whether you are in a love relationship with God the Father and Jesus Christ. Are you experiencing their love for you? And then finally, are you experientially enjoying, delighting in, having affection for other believers. Then in verse 21, if we persuade our hearts, as it's said in verse 20, in verse 21, he says, Beloved, those who are loved by God, beloved, if our heart does not personally hold something against us, that is, if our heart is not beating us up, but instead we persuaded our hearts about the reality of our Christian experience by the love experience that we're having with God the Father and with other believers, and using that as the evidence of the reality of our Christian faith, because ultimately that is the evidence, not our memories, not false beliefs, not false pictures, but that the love we have from God and the love we have for others, that is the proof of the reality of our Christian conversion and our Christian walk. Beloved, if our heart does not personally hold something against us, notice this word personally occurs 3 different times. Our heart's holding something against us, God personally knowing everything, and then if our heart does not personally hold something against us, we have confident intimacy facing, face to face, spiritually speaking, with God. And the advantage of that is whatever we ask, we receive from Him because we keep His commandments. And what is that? To love God and love others and do the things that are pleasing to Him, to love God and to love others. Then we end up with the verses I referred to at the beginning. And this is His commandment, that we believe in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another, just as He commanded us. This is a wonderful portion because it tells us not to be spiritually passive, to just live off of what's in our memory banks, false beliefs, false pictures, accusations, whether they're true or false. We need to be living off of a living relationship to God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, this is more than you ever wanted to know about talking to yourself, arguing with yourself, and persuading your own heart about the love of God.